Broadwater.
Here.
Councilmember Doe.
Here.
Councilmember Wynn.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Jones.
Here.
Mayor Dalton.
Here. We'll have the invocation by Keith Jones, the Public Works Director, and a Pledge of Allegiance by Councilman Jones. Jones and Jones, I guess.
Dear Lord, be with us as we gather this evening. Purify our intentions, strengthen our purpose, and grant that in serving our fine community, we might also serve you. Amen.
Amen. Please face our great flag and say the pledge with me.
I pledge
allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I see we have some presentations.
Yes, we do, Mr. Mayor. I'd like Keith Jones to make the first presentation this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Fertal. Tonight, the Garden Grove City Council is pleased to recognize two individuals who have enhanced our community with their generosity, passion, and spirit of service. They are the Senior Volunteer Man and Woman of the Year, Lauren Clark and Charlene Connie. This special distinction honors their numerous hours of charitable work with their respective nominating agencies. I'd like to ask Lauren Clark and Charlene Connie to please come forward. Traditionally, the Senior Man and Woman of the Year are crowned the Strawberry Ball King and Queen. Lauren Clark this year is King and was nominated by the H. Lewis Lake Senior Center. For the past 7 years, Lauren has been a hard-working member of the Community Emergency Response Team and volunteers in policing emergency response programs. Both programs assist police, fire, and paramedics during disasters and emergencies. Lauren assisted during the 2007 San Diego Canyon fires. Lauren can also be found at City Hall volunteering at the front information desk. His knowledge about all of the city's services make him a natural at directing residents to the right department. His magnetic personality is an added bonus. A Canadian native, Lauren grew up 40 miles from Niagara Falls and served as a police officer with the Ontario Provincial Police Force from 1955 to 1962. He moved to the U.S. and got married 10 days later. Together with his wife, Frances, Lauren has lived in the same Garden Grove home for 41 years. His work ethic and dedication make Lauren Clark most deserving of the title Senior Man of the Year. Charlene Connie is this year's Senior Woman of the Year and was crowned the Strawberry Ball Queen. She was nominated by the Garden Grove chapter of the American Association of University Women. As an AAUW volunteer, she dedicates time to improving the lives of women and children. She has co-chaired fundraisers awarding college scholarships to Garden Grove High School seniors, as well as scholarships for intermediate schools, girls, to attend science and math camps. Charlene also volunteers with the Garden Grove Assistance League. Charlene is a kindergarten teacher by trade with a gardening and hobby. Her green thumb has resulted in a Home of the Year award and a 5-time home beautification winner in the Garden Grove Pride program. It is Charlene's tireless efforts to making positive changes in the lives of others that reaffirms her choice as the Senior Woman of the Year. At this time, the Mayor and the City Council would like to present both Lauren Clark and Charlene Connie, each with a certificate of recognition and memento for being named the Senior Volunteer Man and Women of the Year. As senior volunteers, they are prime examples of commitment and service benefiting the community. Tonight, the city honors you both as exceptional role models.
Both have the opportunity to say a few words.
Let's do a picture for you.
Wait a minute, Lauren.
Hold on one sec.
I
We'll
sent
do
you
a
off too soon. Come on.
photo op.
Turn around.
Couple
Need it
pictures.
for
You want to come over
posterity.
here? If you'd like this one.
You know, if you switch, Dina can actually be seen.
Yeah.
If you could switch places. If you could switch places.
Literally, yeah.
Honest.
I want to see Dina.
Okay, you ready? Let me get another one.
Did you want to come up for two? Are you good there?
We thank you. Now, if you'd like to say a few words at the podium, please. Lauren? First time I've seen you speechless.
I'd just like to say thank you to the mayor and to the Garden Grove City Council and to the Senior Center for feeling I could do this. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Too big. Mr. Mayor, we have Philip Law from SCAG to give a information presentation on the Pacific Electric right-of-way transit study.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and the City Council. I'm Philip Law with the Southern California Association of Governments. We are the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Southern California, and we have initiated a transit planning study in coordination with the Orange County Transportation Authority and the LA County Metropolitan Transportation Authority. This study is called the Pacific Electric Right-of-Way West Santa Ana Branch Corridor Alternatives Analysis. We are looking at the railroad right-of-way that runs between the two counties. The background for this study, it emerged out of the development of our 2008 Regional Transportation Plan and the discussions regarding the use of this right-of-way. The direction that staff received from the Transportation Committee at SCAG was to work with the LA County MTA and OCTA to conduct a planning study, and that has led us to our current effort. The purpose of this study is to follow the federal guidelines for alternatives analysis and to identify a locally preferred strategy for improving transportation on this corridor. SCAG's role is limited to conducting the planning study, and at the end of the study, it will be up to the OCTA and MTA boards to make the decision whether they want to carry this project forward beyond the planning stage and into CEQA, NEPA, environmental work, and further engineering and project development. In this map, you can see the right-of-way itself extends for about 20 miles. It's the solid red line that runs diagonally between the city of Paramount in the northwest and the city of Santa Ana in the southeast. It is currently abandoned and is not used for transportation purposes. In the Pacific Red cars used to run on this back in the early 1900s. As part of the study, we will be evaluating options to connect to Los Angeles Union Station on the north end, and on the south end to the Santa Ana Regional Transportation Center. This is a brief schedule for the study. It will take approximately 22 months. The basic idea for this is to start with a universe of potential alternatives that can be evaluated through technical analysis, through public input, and through input from our advisory committees, which I'll talk about later. So all of that input will hopefully allow us to screen down the alternatives until the end of the study, where we will have a locally preferred strategy to recommend to our Transportation Committee and to the MTA and OCTA boards. We will be evaluating the full range of alternatives. The first two you see on this slide are required by the Federal Transit Administration. The no-build alternative represents simply doing nothing. What will be the performance of the transportation system in this corridor if we do nothing beyond what's already been committed today? The second option, the Transportation Systems Management alternative, is a series of low-cost operational type improvements, such as increasing bus service, that would improve conditions, but is everything just short of building a completely new fixed guideway facility. So the build alternatives, everything's pretty much on the table right now. So we have bus rapid transit as a potential, light rail, which could include streetcar alternatives, commuter rail like the Metrolink system, and high-speed rail. We will be looking at different vertical alignments, including elevated, at-grade, and depressed options. I wanted to mention a number of related studies in this area that we will be coordinating with and keeping track of as they impact the use of this railroad right-of-way. One is the Santa Ana Garden Grove Fixed Skyway Project, which is currently under study. It would potentially traverse this Pacific Electric right-of-way between Harbor Boulevard and Rate Street in Santa Ana and Garden Grove. Secondly, there is the Central County Corridor Major Investment Study, which you will receive a presentation following mine. By OCTA, and they are also looking at potential improvements to the right-of-way, including the Santa Ana Garden Grove Fixed Skyway and the SR22 direct ramps onto this railroad right-of-way. And the bottom line is we will have to work closely with these agencies doing these studies to coordinate any potential recommendations coming out of our study to ensure that we are able to accommodate all the different improvements being proposed. As part of our overall public outreach strategy, we have been briefing the elected officials from each of the cities along the corridor. Mayor Dalton is the representative from Garden Grove on our steering committee. We also have a technical advisory committee, so these two committees are providing us input and recommendations as we move forward. We will also have 3 rounds of community meetings throughout the study. The first round is actually going to begin next week, and I'll provide a list of the meetings in a subsequent slide. We also have other communication tools we'll be incorporating, including the project webpage and also newsletters and use of new media. In our interviews with each of the cities, several dominant themes have emerged, and I want to run through these really quickly. First is traffic. Because it's a diagonal right-of-way and it crosses many major arterials that run both east-west and north-south, there was a lot of concern from the cities about the impact on traffic, and also recommendations that we look at elevated alternatives or underground alternatives so that we don't impact the streets. There is also concern about the quality of life. There are a lot of single-family residential neighborhoods adjacent to the railroad right-of-way, and there was concern about the impacts due to noise, air quality, aesthetics, and so on. There was a question about speed. In order to attract people to take transit, we have to develop an alternative that provides a competitive advantage to the automobile. So there was a request to have transit service that did provide some time advantage. There is also the issue of cost, not just in terms of how expensive this project could be, but also how expensive it would be for a typical rider. What kind of fares would they be expected to pay to get on the system? Congestion relief, there was the issue of whether this project would actually attract enough ridership to result in congestion relief on the adjacent arterials and freeways, and whether this project is a cost-effective approach to reduce congestion. A lot of cities identified development as an opportunity for this project. They have made land use and planning changes in preparation for potential transit stations within their cities to spur economic development. There was also the issue of employment. A lot of cities look at this project as a way to bring employees to job sites in their cities and also to allow their residents to access employment opportunities. And similarly, the last 2 items also involve access to educational and cultural opportunities and also access to recreational opportunities. A lot of cities are looking at this right-of-way to also provide bicycle and pedestrian facilities for their residents. I mentioned the number of community meetings that we will be holding. The purpose of these meetings is to introduce the study to the public and ask for their input on what kinds of issues that they're facing and how this project might potentially address those issues. Also, what's the best way to communicate with them and keep them involved and informed of what we're doing. We also want to create a comfortable environment for them to share their thoughts and ideas with us. This first round of community meetings, we will have 6 along the corridor. The first one is in Garden Grove at the community center here on Tuesday, June 15th at 6:30 p.m. I want to thank the city for being gracious and allowing us to use their facilities. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
You're planning on a community meeting in Huntington Park on Salt Lake recreational facility there. Are you planning on running this rail and hooking up a Union Station up the old Union Pacific right away?
That's definitely one of the potentials that's on the table right now, the UP rail line that runs north from Paramount into Union Station. And that's why we've included all of those cities.
Seems like it'd be a natural.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, 2C.
2C, we have Tamara Warren from OCTA to give us somewhat of a related presentation on the Central County Corridor Major Investment Study.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Thank you for having me. My name is Tammy Warren. I'm with the Orange County Transportation Authority, and I'm the project manager for the Central County Corridor Major Investment Study. I came to this council several months back, I think last year, to provide you an update on where we were headed and what we intended to do as part of this process. And today I'm here to kind of share where we've gone and where we are today. I'm going to start first with just kind of a reminder of what the Central County Corridor Study Area is. And as you can see on this slide, the study area is bordered at the north by Ball Road, on the east by the 55, the south PCH, or Pacific Coast Highway, and the west Beach Boulevard. There are 12 cities in the study area and 4 supervisorial districts. So what is a major investment study? Just as a reminder, it's a integrated planning, engineering, and public outreach process. And what that means is as we look at different projects, as we look out to the year 2035, we want to make sure that things that we come up with are not only technically feasible and make sense from an engineering standpoint, but they also have public support, because if we bring things forward that don't have the public support, we won't be successful in making sure they're implemented. The end result of this study process is a multimodal program of projects. That means we'll have transit improvements, arterial improvements, and freeway improvements. So it is multimodal. And what it does for us is it sets the stage so that as federal and state funding become available, we kind of know where we want to go. We're able to capture those funds. So projects in here, although there are some within Measure M2, which I'll share, but many of the projects are not funded, but that is, again, so that we can kind of know where we want to go and then capture those funds as they start to become available. This is our study process slide that just kind of shows you where we start off broad with all projects on the table and all ideas or concepts that people say, hey, why don't you look at whatever it is. Things like the 57 extension, taking the 57 from where it currently terminates at the Orange Crush and running it down the Santa Ana River. Ideas like that kind of come up through this process and we start to look at those. And then we weed them out, but depending on, again, that public input and technical feasibility. As you can see on the slide, we're near the end of this process. We're near to going to our OCTA board to recommend a locally preferred strategy. This slide kind of shows you how the screening process works, and screening just means we look at some of those ideas and concepts that I mentioned. We take a look at them to see how much they cost, whether they're technically, whether we can build them, and then again, is there public input? And things start to fall out, and things such as that extension of the 57 freeway did fall out because it didn't have public support. Another major project that did fall out early on was the widening of the 55 freeway, adding 2 lanes to the 55. That would have gone outside of the right-of-way. It would have impacted homes and businesses, and once again, because of that lack of support, that concept was eliminated. However, something coming forward is the addition of 1 lane on the freeway where it can be done within the existing right-of-way. So that just gives you an idea. At this point, we're down to the list of projects that we believe should move forward, that we believe have support. Some of them are not necessarily projects. Some of them need to be continued to be studied, but we believe we have a good list of projects that technically make sense and also have public support. So what I'd like to do is share with you what, focusing on Garden Grove, what projects are kind of coming through the study process. First, I want to concentrate on Measure M2. Now, these are programs that have already been approved by the public, but that when you look out to the year 2035, these are projects that we expect to have in place as we reach that future year. Arterial intersection synchronization in the city of Garden Grove or affecting Garden Grove, north-south roadways such as Beach Boulevard, Magnolia Avenue, Brookhurst, Euclid, Harbor, and Hastur, east-west roadways, Catella, Chapman, Garden Grove, and Westminster Boulevard. And then the build-out of the master plan of arterial highways is included in our M2 program. Additionally, on the freeway side, we have an additional HOV lane on the 5 freeway, a second lane from the 55 to the 57. And I mentioned earlier an additional lane on the 55, as well as some other freeway improvements. On the transit side, community-based shuttles in Central and East Garden Grove that are coming through as part of the M2 program. Again, these are proposed because these are things that the city has brought forward, and we'll be using, looking at those and working with the city to compete for funds on those areas, as well as the Go Local program of rubber tire projects, Metrolink connectors to Arctic and the Orange Santa Ana Transportation Center, and the high-capacity fixed guideway, Sartic to Harbor Boulevard. From the proposed side coming out of this particular Central County Corridor study, on the arterial side, we're looking at smart street improvements, taking a look at Beach Boulevard, Brookhurst Street, and Westminster Boulevard, looking at enhanced intersections on Beach Boulevard, Brookhurst, Harbor, and Westminster, as well as taking a closer look at both Beach Boulevard and Harbor Boulevard. Those were things that, as we looked through, there was a real lack of north-south capacity and a need and a demand in the future years. So we want to take a look at maybe some potential opportunities for improvements in those areas, again, listening to what we heard, and that was to make sure we stayed generally within the existing right-of-way. On the freeway project side, you heard earlier when Philip described the 22 connector ramps to the Pacific Electric right-of-way. That's something that the city of Santa Ana was very interested in and showed some real improvement in the area, as well as there's a lot of concern with the Orange Crush area, the 22 I-557 connector area. So we want to take a look at what we can do there. So those would be future studies to look a little bit closer at those two areas. On the transit side, we'd be looking at enhanced bus rapid transit on Beach Boulevard, Harbor, Westminster, and Catella, and local bus improvements on the streets that you see on this list. So what happens with these projects? They come together, as I said, it's a multimodal program, so there's arterial improvements, freeway, and transit that come together to help meet that future 2035 year. And as I mentioned, there was a real push from the community and from our local elected officials in the study area that we needed to really focus on maximizing the existing infrastructure, seeing what we could do to make it more efficient, but all the while making sure we kept community impacts at a minimum. This slide just shows you what we hope to achieve. On the freeway side, we're looking at, with Measure M2 and these proposed projects, about 12 projects on the freeway side for improvements, arterials 112, and transit 33. And what we expect this to result in when we look at the year 2035 and compare it to if we did nothing and we only what's already planned and approved, we're expecting that we will, if we implement these programs, a 17% delay, a reduction in delay on the freeway side compared to baseline, as well as a 44% reduction in delay on the arterial side, and in transit ridership, hopefully we would achieve an increase of about 20%. This would be for a total cost of $3 billion, which some of this is funded, or a good chunk of this is funded through M2, and the rest, again, would be what we'd be looking as we go out in the future years for state and federal funding to help us achieve this. My last slide just shows you kind of what our next steps are. I'm doing these city council briefings to all the cities in the study area that are interested in having us come. We are planning public open houses. In fact, we have our first one this Thursday, June 10th, from 5 to 7 p.m. right here in Garden Grove at Evans Elementary School. We have 2 additional ones, one on June 16th in Fountain Valley and one on June 17th in Tustin. Then we hope, if we feel that what we heard from the public matches what we think we should move forward, we'll bring that back to our board of directors, OCTA's board, in August and get their approval for that. And if everything is approved, that it will be incorporated into our long-range transportation plan. And again, as funding becomes available, those will be the projects that we'll be seeking to get funding for. So that concludes my presentation. I do just want to thank the city. I know Mayor Dalton and Director Dalton for us has been participating on that public, our Policy Advisory Committee, your staff has been, and they helped us with publicizing the open houses by getting information on your website as well as onto your public access channel. So thank you very much for your help.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to pull item 5B from the consent calendar. 5B is a proclamation for the overseas Vietnamese veterans of the Republic South Vietnam Day of Remembrance. Is there someone here that to accept the resolution?
I think so.
Okay. All right, why don't you come forward?
Are we voting on it now? Are we voting on it now?
We will in a minute. We will, yeah. We will in a minute. Oh, no. Okay. I stated what the purpose is. I'm pulling this forward because there's a lengthy calendar, so we want to get some of the people that can be moved out a little earlier to make more room. I'll entertain a motion.
Move. A second.
I have a motion, second, call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
Okay, if you come forward, I'll hand you the resolution. We've got a couple of people coming up with the camera, so wait more than Okay, turn around. Okay, if one of you would like to speak, we'll go ahead and the microphone's right over there.
The Honorable Mayor William Dutton, Honorable Councilman and Council Madam, in behalf of COVA, the Coalition of Veteran Vietnamese, we sincerely appreciate it for your declaration, and it's meant a lot for us. And COVA have been a major trust and fort for community, seeing majority of families in Garden Row and Santa Ana's and Westminster all close tie with the military route. In behalf of the absence of the president of COVA, I represent COVA and really sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, and now open oral communications for the council, for the agency, and the sanitary district. Bob Main.
And I have an invitation for all the council.
Mr. Mayor, council, staff, thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight. On the ballot today, I'm not here to talk about that, but it's connected, was a Proposition 16 promoted by one of the big utility companies to the tune of close to $50 million. I got a flyer in the mail, and I was shocked to see where the Garden Grove Chamber of Commerce endorsed that proposition. So I called the chamber and talked to the president and was told that that decision was made by the Governmental Affairs Committee, and I still don't understand why they endorsed that proposition. It's called the voters' rights. It was more like PG&E rights. But anyway, my question tonight is, did anybody from the Governmental Affairs Committee or anybody from the chamber contact the city? Because their reason was to endorse that is because there was nobody in the city of Garden Grove qualified to run an electric company. That's the end of my question.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anybody being contacted. Okay. No.
That's it.
Okay, Bob, thank you very much.
Will I ever...
Well, the answer, I mean,
Yeah.
Matt's speaking for the city, and none of, well, I can't speak for the rest of the council.
I
No one
understand.
contacted me,
I
though.
understand. Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Okay. David Terry Lotherborn.
I'm David Terry Lotherborn. This is a sad moment, and I bring you sad news if you don't already know it. One of our super citizens, Bob Owens, passed away on the 3rd of June. He was a very loud speaking citizen who came before the council and before the city, always bringing information that he had collected that was better for us all. Sometimes it never went through, and sometimes it did. Bob was a special friend. He never had a bad word to say about anybody. But he did have correction for some people that he felt should be corrected. And that's what I'm bringing out right now. My friend Bob Owens, a citizen, a patriot, a veteran, needs to have a moment of silence to us all where we can hear his voice speak. I don't have a tape on him, but maybe we can spend a moment just to think about Bob. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. James Stew might have left already if he was here for the proclamation. Long Pham? Okay. Robin Macario.
Good evening, City Council, Garden Grove residents. I'm Robin Marcario. I would like to take also, as David did a moment ago, to take this brief opportunity to say a few words regarding the passing of Big Bob Owen. Big Bob Owen died last week after a struggle with cancer for several years. He attended City Council meetings for decades, contributing his views on issues in our great city. He would express his genuine concerns for the unemployed, the prohibitive costs of housing, and other issues of the silent majority. He was the voice of the people. His booming voice filled these chambers and commanded everyone to listen. It was especially difficult for me to stand up and speak after him, for the room was filled with his lingering, bellowing voice. His beloved wife, Kathy, often recounts upon her husband Bob Owen's notoriety. While out at a restaurant or shopping together, people would thank him and hug him for saying what they were feeling at our city council meetings. His contributions to our community are numerous. His death is a loss for us all. Big Bob Owen was admired by many, loved by more, and will be missed by everyone.
Okay, Charles Mitchell.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and staff. Today is Election Day, and it's very confusing for a lot of people. One of the things that's confusing is the way some of these propositions are written. If you vote yes, that means you don't like something. So in essence, voting yes means no. It's the way they're written, it just makes things very confusing. If they just come straight out and say, okay, this is what we want to do, yes or no, that'd be a lot simpler. But they cross them over that way and makes it very difficult to figure out exactly what it is you want them to do when you vote. Now, one of the areas on the ballot for a lot of people in Garden Grove is Measure A. Now, that's a $250 million bond issue for Garden Grove Unified School District. My wife and I were a little bit concerned when we got our write-in ballots. We didn't see that on our ballots. And we thought about it, oh yeah, that's right. We don't live in the Garden Grove Unified School District. even though we live in the city of Garden Grove, we live in the Westminster School District. And for a long time, we couldn't figure out what was going on. And then we got to thinking about the fact that, well, in the late 40s and 50s, a lot of people moved to Southern California. The big housing boom. A lot of families settled here. They needed schools. Okay, so the school districts were organized, and their boundaries were spread all over the county. However, many of the cities did not incorporate until the mid-50s, after the school districts are already established, which is why in some areas of Anaheim you have people voting for the Garden Grove Unified School District bonds. Now, it may be of interest to know, and I did a lot of checking today to find out exactly what the impact might be. And I found out that if you do not live within the Garden Grove Unified School District area, if Measure A passes, you are not subject to the assessment. It only affects those properties within the school district. So a lot of people in Anaheim are going to be surprised when they get their tax bills if it passes. Another thing that I found that was a bit disturbing along Westminster Avenue at the intersection of Newland. Some time back, they did some work there with sewer lines and water lines, and we thought it was all done. It took quite a bit of time for them to do it, and the traffic was really snarled there. And then this week, I've noticed they're back at it again. They've got it all torn up. And I found out the reason was when they were ready to put the pipe in, they had not compacted the soil enough underneath where the pipe was going to go. So when they put the pipe in, put all the fill on top and packed it all down, instead of a straight line pipe, we have something like a wave. Now that may account for some of the things that are happening. For instance, there's a sinkhole on Westminster Boulevard right in front of Taco Bell that they've filled in at least twice, and it continues to sink. Now, I wonder if that's related. But anyway, my main concern is, at least a couple of months ago, I seem to recall on the consent items that the City Council was asked to approve final approval and payment for that project. And I hope that the contractor is going to make good on what was not properly done in the first place. And knowing Bob Owens, I think he would have loved this issue, because he would have wondered if the city supervisors who inspected that trench were fully aware of the fact that it was not properly done. I think Bob will be looking down on us just to see if we handle this properly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, will you look into this and get back to me on exactly what's happening over there? And we'll have an answer at a later date. Okay, I'm closing our communications. Is any?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. Mr. Bob Maine, Robert Maine, made a comment about Proposition 16. And I think Proposition 16 is a good example of how horrible an amendment can be on the statewide voting. Proposition 16 was put on there by PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric. Cost them over $50 million, way over $50 million. And the thing it was doing was it was taking municipalities and cities out of the electric business, or out of getting into the electric business. It was eliminating competition for themselves. A lot of cities have taken a look at electricity and see if they couldn't provide it at a cheaper rate than the companies that we were servicing. Anaheim's a good example. Anaheim's had their own electric company for probably 50 years. And if you buy electricity in Anaheim, you're buying it at about 10 or 15% cheaper than you're buying it in Garden Grove, because they have done well in supplying electricity there. And a lot of times that happens, where a city can provide something cheaper than the private sector. About 10 years ago, a number of people pushed us to privatize the water department into privatization. And we had 4 different companies bid on it, and not one of them came close to matching the cost that we were getting the water bill for. I think that Proposition 16 was a huge mistake. I don't know if it'll pass or not. There wasn't anybody out against it because there was no money against it. And municipalities that would be hurt by it, it's illegal for them to put money in against it. I did write a letter for the Journal in it about it early on. I'm sorry that the Garden Grove Chamber endorsed it. It makes me sick to think they did that because this was horrible. I mean, PG&E went bankrupt about 14 years ago, and the state of California and the federal government pulled them out of it, and now they're going to take municipalities out of the electric business if it passes. It won't pass on my vote. Anyway, I just wanted to support Bob and what he said. I think he did a good job.
Yeah, I think, that is one of those cases you have to be very careful where a yes means a no or a no means a yes. And that's why it's incumbent upon all of us to read them thoroughly and do the research, the proper research required to ensure that we vote for what we really want and we get what we think we're voting for. Okay, any other comments? Okay, I'll recess the council and we'll go to the agency.
At this time, we'll open up the Garden Grove Agency for Community Development. Would you please call roll?
Member Dalton.
Here.
Member Doe.
Here.
Member Jones.
Here.
Vice Chair Wynn.
Here.
Chair Broadwater.
Here. Okay, let's go to consent items. Mr. Fertel?
You have 2 items, 4A and 4B, and it's recommended that these items be acted on simultaneously unless a separate discussion is requested.
Move both.
Second.
We have a motion to move the issue and a second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
Well, we have no public hearings. We have no items for consideration. Matters from agency members. Any?
None.
Any from the director?
Nope.
Okay, at this time, we will adjourn until June 22nd at 5:30 p.m.
Okay, now we'll go to the Sanitary District. Let the record show that all members are present. Item 6.
Mr. President, item 6A is award of contract for a sewer project, and Keith Jones is going to give a presentation on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Fertel. Mr. President, members of the board, this is again going after a capacity-deficient sewer system, which is located, which will fix Brookhurst Street sewer from Chapman Avenue to Parliament Avenue and Parliament Avenue sewer from Brookhurst Street to Palmwood Drive. Pursuant to the Garden Grove Municipal Code, we bid the project and we received 8 bids, and out of those 8 bids, the lowest bidder was Paulus Engineering Incorporated. Project will be financed with sewer funds, so there's no impact to the general fund, and so it's recommended that the Garden Grove Sanitary District Board award contract to Paulus Engineering for an amount of $1,587,611. Also to reject all other bids, and finally to authorize the general manager to execute the agreement on behalf of the Sanitary District. Completes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff?
Move the issue.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
Any matters from any members or general manager? Okay, hearing none?
None.
Okay, we'll adjourn the Sanitary District till Tuesday, June 22nd at 6:30 p.m. in the council chambers. And we'll reconvene the council and go to consent items.
Mr. Mayor, it's recommended that items 5A through 5I be acted on simultaneously unless a separate discussion is requested by a member, and of course 5B has already been pulled.
Okay, do I
Move
have
the balance.
have a motion? Second? All in favor?
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
Okay, items for consideration.
Your first item, actually they're related, 8A, 1, 2, and 3 all have to do with the Garden Grove Street Lighting District, as well as the Park Maintenance District. And Tony Aquino is here to give staff report on these items.
Okay, while we're waiting, can that be passed with one motion or does it take individual?
One motion.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Fertal. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, Tonight, the City Council is asked to adopt resolutions initiating the proceedings for the levying of assessments, adopt the resolution approving the engineer's report, and adopt the resolutions of intention setting a public hearing date for July 13, 2010, for the levying of assessments for fiscal year 2010-2011 for the city's street lighting and park maintenance districts. In order to continue the lighting of streets and the maintenance of parks at the current service levels for the benefit of the city's property owners, it is necessary to initiate the proceedings of levying annual assessments under the Landscaping and Lighting Act of 1972. The purpose of the assessments is to pay for the operations and maintenance of the streetlight and park districts. An engineer's report has been prepared and is on file for the 3 districts with the Public Works Department detailing the costs and estimates. The proposed rates for each district are the same rates adopted by the City Council in fiscal year 2009-2010. The adoption of the street lighting and park maintenance assessments will raise approximately $1.3 million in street lighting revenue and $700,000 in park maintenance revenue. This concludes staff's report, and staff is available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move the issue.
A motion and a second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
Thank you. 8B.
8B is award of contract to R.J. Noble Company for Fairview Street Trask Avenue intersection improvements, and Bill Murray is here to give a staff report on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Fattel. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, the widening of the intersection of Fairview and Trask was identified as a capital improvement in the approved city budget for this fiscal year. On May 24, 2010, 7 qualified bids were opened. The lowest qualified bid was from R.J. Noble for just under $500,000. Should council award the contract tonight, work will begin once the utility poles are relocated, which should be done by September. Construction will likely take about 8 months, and we expect a lot of that to be, well, part of that to be delays due to weather. However, the construction will be done in a manner to minimize the impact on traffic. The project will be funded with Measure M turnback monies, Measure M grant, and gas tax, a combination of all those funds. Staff recommends the award of the project and execution of the construction agreement with R.J. Noble. This concludes staff report.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
Okay, 8C.
8C is another street improvement project on Brookhurst and Garden Boulevard, and Bill Murray will give a staff report on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Fertel. Again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the widening of the intersection of Brookhurst and Garden Grove Boulevard was identified as a capital improvement in the approved city budget for this fiscal year. On April 29, 2010, 12 qualified bids were opened. The lowest qualified bid was from R.J. Noble for just over $390,000. Should council award the contract tonight, work will begin once the overhead utilities are relocated. This should actually take about a year, and we expect that to be done, actually, it's September of 2011, so it's going to take over a year. Construction will take, again, about 8 months, and we expect delays due to the weather. That construction in that intersection will be done to minimize impact on traffic. The project will be funded by Measure M and Measure M grant, so you get turnback and grant funding only for this. Staff recommends the award of the project and execution of the construction agreement with R.J. Noble. This concludes staff report.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
I have a motion. A second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
8D.
8D is another award of contract to Moore Electrical Contracting, and Bill Murray will give a staff report on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Fertel. Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The upgrading of the Traffic Management Center and installation of fiber optic interconnect system was started by the late George Allen, city traffic engineer. The project is identified as a capital improvement in the approved city budget for this fiscal year. The fiber optic installation is extensive. It will allow faster communication with 14 water facilities, 3 fire stations, and 3 park centers, while saving a nominal amount on telecommunication fees. On April 29, 2010, 5 bids were opened. 3 of those bids were determined responsive. The lowest qualified bid was from Moore Electrical Contracting for just over $3.7 million. Should the council award the contract tonight, work will begin next month and continue for about a year. The construction will be done in a manner to minimize impact on vehicular traffic and the counter area of the first floor of City Hall. The project will be funded by federal grant, gas tax, Measure M grants, and some water funds. Staff recommends the award of the project and execution of the construction agreement with Moore Electric. This concludes staff's report.
Okay, any questions for staff?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, I have motion and second. Call for the vote.
Yours didn't. The motion received 5 yes votes.
8E.
Mr. Mayor, 8E is an amendment to the affordable housing agreements with Tamerlane Associates, and Katie Angel is here to give a staff report on this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Before your consideration tonight are 11 amendments to affordable housing loan agreements with Tamerlane Associates, LLC, to extend the city's option term to repurchase the properties from the owner and amend the definitions of the repurchase prices for those properties. In February 2004, the city's Neighborhood Improvement Division began working with the owner for the acquisition of several apartment buildings near the Harbor Corridor located on Tamerlane Drive, for the purpose of rehabilitating those buildings and allowing those units to be affordable to low-income families through affordability covenants. Since that time, the owner has entered into 11 affordable housing agreements with the city and 2 affordable housing agreements with the Garden Grove Agency for Community Development. The agreements between the city and the owner currently provide for an option term to repurchase the properties of 10 years from the date the owner acquired the properties. City staff has prepared amendments to the affordable housing agreements to extend the option terms so that they will expire on March 19, 2030, to be consistent with the expiration of the option terms in the 2 agreements recently approved by the agency in January of this year. The extended term will allow the city to ensure the long-term stability of the neighborhood by permitting the city to repurchase the properties if necessary. The owner has agreed to extend the option terms in exchange for amending the option purchase price to include a monthly asset management fee that accrues beginning in the 37th month following the acquisition. The amended option price will be calculated as the amount of the then current balance of the owner's bank loan plus the then current balance of the city loan plus the asset management fees accrued to that point in time, less net profits retained by the owner, plus operating losses. The option purchase price becomes payable if and when the city exercises the option to repurchase any of the properties. The amount of the asset management fee for each property is calculated based upon the original developer fees included in the original agreements for the property divided by 24 months. There are no fiscal impact fees from these amendments unless the city exercises the option to repurchase any of the properties before the expiration of the option term. If the city exercises the option, the fiscal impact will be equivalent to the monthly asset management fees accrued up until the point when the option is exercised, less the amortization of the bank loans, which will reduce the overall purchase price. Staff recommends that the City Council approve the attached amendments to the affordable housing loan agreements between the city and the owner, and authorize the city manager to execute the amendments and all other documents necessary to implement the amendments. That concludes the presentation, and staff is available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Is there a time limit on repurchase? I mean, if we decided to buy them back next year, could we do that?
Yes, we could. The option term will extend for all properties now until March of 2030.
I won't be here then.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Move the issue.
Second. Motion is second. Call for the vote.
Motion received 5 yes votes.
Okay, I'm going to recess the council for 5 minutes, and after that, we'll have a study session on the proposed budget for fiscal year 2010-2011.
Can we say something about that?
Yeah, well, okay. I just thought you needed 5 minutes. We'll come back. Want to do it now? Yeah, we can do that. Okay, go ahead.
A few minutes.
I'm certainly going to miss Bob Owens. He comes in here and pounds on that pulpit every once in a while and stirs things up pretty good. One time he got so mad at me when I was mayor, he said that he was going to check into the same old folks' home as me and haunt me till my dying day. Well, he didn't do that, but I always liked Bob. He's a good guy.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry to hear Bob Owens' death, and I want to send my condolence to his family. His voice is not only a loud voice, but a voice of concern for many of the issues in the city, and we appreciate that. I remember he had been yelling at each and every one of the council members, so one day he gave me a call. I didn't get a chance to call him back until after my court hearing, and I asked him, so, you know, you're free to yell at me tonight because it hasn't been my turn yet. But to my surprise, he's never spoke loudly in my direction personally, so I appreciate that. I wanted to, again, share in the loss of Bob's death with his family. Another reminder, the Garden Grove Housing Authority will be accepting applications from July 1st through July 31st. So please remind friends, neighbors, and people you know who are in need of housing assistance. The city will be opening up for applications again, and buy in Garden Grove.
Thank you. Mr. Jones.
Yeah, just say I'm going to miss Bob Owens. Very passionate man. Would get up there with his big voice and stir things up, as everybody said. But then if you saw him in person on the street, he was a big teddy bear. I remember running into him at May's Cafe one morning having breakfast with my family, and I introduced my two little sons to him as Uncle Bob. I said, say hi to Uncle Bob, and he gave him a big hug and high fives and that kind of stuff. And he's just a neat man, so going to miss him.
Thank you. Mr. Doe. Okay. I'd just like to say, you know, there was another side to Bob that a lot of people didn't know. Bob had a way about him, especially if he was going to bring something up controversial, he'd generally call me and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Just so you know, I want you to understand that. And I think in many ways he wanted to give me an opportunity, if I didn't know what the answer was, to at least find it out. But one thing that I really liked about Bob was when he was in here, nobody slept in these council chambers, let me tell you. I mean, if you started dozing off and he banged the podium, boy, it woke you up. But, you know, there was really a method to what he did, because a lot of times he would have a point that it would take a little while to get to, but he'd shake you up a little bit, and then you'd realize, you know, sometimes there's an agenda there, sometimes there's a hidden agenda there. But I don't think he ever truly said a mean word about anybody. He liked to rile us up a little bit, and, you know, I hope there's a new Bob Owens out there, because I'll tell you, it really made us do more, made us be more cognizant of our jobs and find out some of the answers that he was going to ask. But what he did, he really did do it for the community, and there'll never be another Bob Owens. But I'm really going to miss him, and after tonight, when we're at the end, I'm going to adjourn the council in his honor. And my thoughts and prayers do go out to his family, because Bob really was a wonderful guy.